mine over here, you said?
This is a light crowd tonight. Maybe because it's raining back.
I think people can hopefully. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out on this rainy, awful, miserable May evening, but what a great place to be. I'm glad you're inside and covered. I'm Lissa Muscatine. I'm one of the co-owners of Politics and Prose, along with my husband, Brad Graham, who's right here. And on behalf of us and our fabulous staff here, we welcome all of you. This is our 11th panel under the Race in America series, and we are so proud to be doing another one. We will never stop until we get to a point where we don't need to do them, which, you know, I hope is sooner rather than later, obviously. We began hosting these events in 2015 when April Ryan suggested the idea to us. And not only has she been the brains behind every panel since, she's also served as our treasured stalwart moderator, and that she will be doing again for us tonight. So all thanks are due to April. We could not do this without her. We all need to give her a hand. Thank you. And, you know, thinking about the 11 panels we've done so far, I'm reminded that no matter what year it is, we always say how timely the topic of race is at that moment, whether because of senseless killings of black men by police, new attacks on civil rights and free speech, a Supreme Court hell-bent on dismantling the Voting Rights Act, fights over reparations, or a Republican Party and president who are trying to erase the rights and opportunities of black and brown people across the country. So again tonight, I find myself saying that the topic of race in America could not be more timely. However, the difference now is that things have gotten so much worse so quickly, even worse than many of us could have imagined in our darkest dreams just a couple of years ago. Today we live in a nation, and simply put, where some leaders of our government openly embrace white supremacy. Luckily for us tonight, we have a stellar panel to guide us and hopefully give us some ideas for living and behaving and acting out in this very distressing moment. Beginning with our moderator, April Ryan. Most of you know her many, many, many career accomplishments. For those who don't, let me give you a brief summary. April has spent more than 3 decades covering urban issues from the White House. She's the longest serving black member of the White House press corps and has been a close observer covering 6 presidents and their administrations with particular emphasis on how they've approached racial issues. She has gotten into a tangle with one of them publicly, which some of you may recall. Now, here's the deal, though. She tangled that one. I think he forgot that April had a secret weapon, the power of the pen.
That's right.
More on that in a minute. But April is currently Washington Bureau Chief for Black Press USA and host of the Tea with April Ryan on Substack. You're also on all sorts of other Substacks all over the place.
The Tea and the Contrarian, yes.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
my mainstay now.
Those are her main ones. She's the author of 4 excellent books, The Presidency in Black and White, At My Mama's Knee, Under Fire, Reporting from the Front Lines of the Trump Presidency, and Black Women Will Save the World, which celebrates the resilience and strength of black women. But guess what? With all that she's doing, she's about to publish her 5th book. And so you can now get your calendars out and mark this down, October 20th. Her book's going to be out in October. And right here at Politics and Prose on October 20th, we will be hosting April for a discussion of her new book.
But you can also pre-order here as well.
You may pre-order.
That's right.
Thank you. Absolutely. Right. The title is Notes on a Black Clash, When a Black Woman Goes Viral. And I hope she'll tell us a little bit more about that when we get going here tonight. Dr. Mary Frances Berry, just simply put, has done more in her life than the rest of us all combined. She's a professor of American social thought and a professor of history at the University of Pennsylvania, the former chairwoman of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, and the author of a mere 13 books. But get this, she has been awarded 37 honorary degrees.
Wow, yes.
Which is, I don't think I've ever introduced anybody who was, you know, even in the double digits on honorary degrees, let alone 37. Dr. Berry has appeared on Real Time with Bill Maher, The Daily Show, Tavis Smiley, PBS NewsHour, CBS Evening News, Al Jazeera, American News, and MSNBC and CNN. I should also say that all of these panelists have done this before for us, been on an earlier, so they're all veterans. Yes. Keith Boykin, also, welcome back. He's a lawyer, yes. New York Times bestselling author. He's an editor, commentator, film and TV producer, teacher, and former White House staffer. You may have seen his commentary on CNN or on a BET talk show he co-hosted called My Two Cents. Graduate of Dartmouth College and Harvard Law School, he served in the White House, co-founded the National Black Justice Coalition, and taught at the Institute for Research in African American Studies at Columbia University. He's won a Lambda Literary Award and has been the editor of 7 books. And last but not and never least, Michael Eric Dyson, who's a very familiar face in our bookstore. He's been called a street fighter in a suit and tie, and I'm really glad you're wearing a suit and tie, because when I decided I was going to mention that quote, I thought, what if he doesn't show up in a tie? But he did. He's a writer, teacher, preacher, award-winning author, and commentator. Among his 25 books are 7 New York Times bestsellers, and he's written about figures from Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Tupac, Jay-Z, Marvin Gaye, Bill Cosby, and Barack Obama, just to name a few. He's won more literary prizes than we have time to go down the list tonight, but a lot. He's been a commentator for NPR, the New York Times, and MSNBC, and has appeared on numerous network and cable news shows. Today, he is a distinguished professor of African American and diaspora studies at Vanderbilt, where he also teaches ethics and society in the Divinity School. So, in short, we have a panel of serious underachievers. But in any case, it's going to be a great conversation. We're so honored to have all of our panelists. We're so honored that all of you came out tonight. So please join me in welcoming April, Mary Frances, Keith, and Michael.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for coming to this event tonight. Thank you, Brad. Yes.
Got to feature the books.
We've got to feature the books, most definitely. We will have a book signing, an unofficial book signing after. But I want to really give credit for this 11th in a series of Race in America panel discussions to Brad and Lissa. They said yes right away. They didn't have to. And I want to thank you. Let's give them a big round of applause, because they continue to have these conversations, these much needed conversations for America to hear. It's not just here in the Connecticut Avenue store, but this is going to be across America. Yes, C-SPAN is here tonight. I want to start this discussion tonight with Mary Frances Berry, someone that I revere highly. And when times of crisis happen, I call her, how should I look at things? And she gives me a rolling history. Yes, she does. And it's really good to hear that, because they're trying to take our history books away. They're trying to tell us something different than what she's saying and what our people who were in the struggle said. And when Donald Trump came back for the second term, and I asked, there was something else going on, but not as bad as this. It seems every day, every week, it gets worse and worse. There's no bottom. And I said, is this as bad as it had been before? She said, it's worse. Can you explain why?
Well, it's worse. Did I turn this on? It's worse because you have reported the news for 6 presidents, but I worked for 5 while I was doing everything else. And I always thought Reagan was worse. And then I thought, hey, why did I think that? That's what I think nowadays. I thought he was worse. And most of them I get on. And then I have lawyer friends and students I've taught, young lawyers, who always say to me, they call me up, they send me messages, they do, all the time. Dr. Berry, whatever happened to the rule of law? Poignantly, they keep asking me that urgently and over again. I said, but there's no rule of law anymore. Face it, when Trump was told he could do whatever he wanted to by the court, ostensibly in the case, he thinks he can. He said that he can do whatever he wants to. So there's no rule of law that we have to get back to a rule of law. But right now, it looks like anything goes. In any case, what I wanted to tell you, I came up here from New Orleans, where I'm doing some work and down there for a while. And as you can see from my hand, it looks kind of weird. I was riding my bike and a car ran over me and broke my hand. But since I love April so much, it's been 9 days, I flew up anyway. Here's what I want to tell you. I wrote this book, Slavery After Slavery, because I teach legal history, and I had taught these cases involving plantation owners who made former slave families' children to continue to work on the plantation after slavery was abolished. And I said, how did they do that? Legally, they did it because they went down to their buddies in the magistrate's office and said, the parents gave me their children. They couldn't take care of them. And so I'm going to make them apprentices because, after all, I'll train them to do something. And so when I decided to do this book, because my friend Sandy Darity was doing a book on the wealth gap that some of you may have read, and he asked me during the pandemic if I'd listen in. He said, you can't go anywhere, so just listen to us talk about what we're doing. And I did that. And they talked about everything and everybody who suffered, but they never said anything about the children. So I kept saying, well, what about the children? And they said, well, what about the children? What children? And I tried to get the young economists to write a book about this. And I said, I'll help you, give you the... And they came back and said, well, it's too much work. You see, you got to trace all these people. You got to do all this stuff. So I did it myself, which is what really ends up happening a lot of the time. And at the time I did it, I wanted to find out how they were kept, what happened to them. And I decided to trace their families all the way from when they were apprentices. And on the apprentice documents, it always says things like, it says, what are you going to teach them how to do? And they would say, pick cotton or tobacco or whatever it is they were doing. But they were already picking cotton and tobacco, which was stupid. And the parents can't take care of them. And in many of these cases, the parents were never informed about anything. And they only took the kids who were old enough to work in the fields. The toddlers, they told the family, you can take them with you. We don't want them. Somebody's got to take care of them. They can't work. And so they went off. And there are stories about people dying, women who came back after they left to try to get their children. They would go in the dark of night and see if they could steal them away and take them. And several of them got killed. And people were beaten on the roads as they tried to come and get their children, trying to find their folk, find their children. A few of them won cases when the Freedmen's Bureau came, but most of them did not. And if you wonder how many people were subjected to this, the scholars who do the data on population indicate that for children who were between the ages of 10 and about 20, which is when apprenticeships ended, that there were hundreds of thousands of Black children who were subjected to either short or long so-called apprenticeships. Many people took the name of the white family as they grew up and as people died, and that's why people have certain people's names. Some people died. A lot of them were poor. They were, when I traced them all the way up to the late 20th century, mostly poor, the stories you've heard about tenant farming and all the rest. And some of you may have read the book about Slavery by Another Name, which is about convict leasing adults and so on. But this is about children and what happened to them. Now, after I traced them, I found that for the most part, they were working class people in the late 20th century, as they had always been. Most of them never went to jail for anything. I mean, they weren't criminals or anything. They're just people working, trying to live, the women and the children and everybody else. And there were some exceptional stories. And one of them was a white plantation owner whose name was Bridgeforth, was one of several brothers. Their father had given them plantations. And he had a son, as many of them did, by a slave woman who he impregnated. But he loved George. And he told George, if you stay with me after slavery's over, I'll make you a wealthy man by the time I die. And I promise you, I will do that. And he did it, though he was attacked by his own family, and everybody said, well, why are you taking care of, why? He did it. And he did it in part by buying land and then transferring it to George. He did anything he had to do, and when he died in 1895, George was the wealthiest black person in the state of Alabama. It was in Alabama. And that family is continued to be wealthy today. Now, all of that I think about because we're at the anniversary, I'm almost through April, of the Declaration of Independence. And I've listened to people all day long. Yesterday, you have too, talking about how important it was that all men were created equal and all those different things, which are good things. And isn't it wonderful that the country is, I heard somebody say, has always been that way. I thought, where's this person been all their lives, you know? And I thought, wait a minute. This, of course, is not true. And we know, because you read, you know, that the country was born with slavery being protected. And it continued to be protected until, you know, legally we wonder if it's still protected, but not protected now. In any case, when I compare what this guy, Bridgeforth, did with what all those other plantation owners did to those children and exploited them, I think he should be a hero of the period of the Declaration of Independence because he took all of the scorn from everybody else. He didn't care what all these people said about him. And that family continues today in Alabama, in Limestone. It's called Darden Industries. They are the wealthiest owners of land and of services, the goods that farmers use. They sell them. They're a big seller of fertilizer, all the different things. I don't know what they all are, insecticide, everything, plant, tractors, you know, whatever else. And I've met all those people, the descendants, and the way they did it was the women worked also, but they worked on the financial and business aspects of the business, and they trained everybody along to keep doing that. The boys went to college, but when they finished, they had to come back and work sometime on the farm. And at least one boy would always be sent to Washington with a politician they knew to be on the agriculture committee staff so he could listen in on everything they were doing and come back and give the intelligence to the family. Okay, they've been doing that all the time all of these years, and they in fact have done very, very well indeed, and well-known people there in Alabama. The farmers who are poor, many black farmers are poor. John Boyd leads the poor black farmers, and they've been, you know, messed over, and all the rest of it's happened to them. But I say two things at the end of this book. That one, you can't get anything done if somebody isn't really willing to go through the fire. Jimmy Baldwin used to come talk to us when I was a student at Howard. He went a lot of places, a lot of people did. And he used to always tell us, even before he wrote the book, that somebody's got to go through the fire. And Martin used to say the same thing, and all the people who were with Martin, that somebody has to be willing to put themselves on the line. And I have always believed that, and I've always tried to do it myself. In this period we're in right now, somebody's got to go through the fire. I don't see anybody among the leadership that we have in this country. Now, maybe you know somebody and you can tell me. I'd be happy to talk to them or go work with them. Who's willing to go through the fire? Callie House, who I wrote a book about, My Face is Black is True, who started a reparations movement and went to prison for it because they said she was a fraud because she shouldn't be telling people they might possibly get something because she knew the government would never give them anything. And she died. Okay, a horrible death. But she went through the fire. She was poor. This guy, the white guy, the Bridgeforth, he went through the fire. He didn't care what anybody said about it. He said it's the right thing to do. And I don't care what you say. I'm taking care of my family. I'm trying to help. This is an injustice. And I'm going to help my son, and I want him intergenerationally. And the family has carried this on. So if we're going to get through this period now of the captivity, the story about what happened to all these people, and they survived. The poor ones survived. I know what the families are, and all the rest of them, and the ones who did all right survived. We need to encourage more people to be willing. Somebody's got to go through the fire. I don't know if I can go through there with one hand. I'll try, maybe if I can. But that's what I think.
Thank you for giving us that history. I'm serious. I'm dead serious because, again, they don't want us to know, and we know who the they happens to be. They don't want us to know that. That was a promise kept. That was a promise kept. What happened, and we talked about this in the room prior to coming out here with you, what would have happened if many of those slave owners who had children by their slave women, the mulattoes, what would have happened if those slave owners kept those promises? What would have happened? The generations of inequality and low income status would have been obliterated, correct? Don't you
We
agree?
wouldn't be talking about reparations. We wouldn't be talking about reparations or anything else. I say that at the end of the book. What if they all had the children that they sired on these slave women? What if they'd all took the criticisms and everything else and the resources and say, I'm going to take care of my family? And there's some people maybe did, but not a lot of them ever did. But the world would be different that we live in, and it's not.
And that goes to promises kept. Keith, what are the promises that need to be kept and that aren't being kept? And then, Michael, I'm going to come to you about reparations because it seems we've been talking about HR 40 for quite a long time. And it seems another group of people are getting reparations, the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, and the January 6th. Woo, that really moved you, didn't it? What is it? 1.77 billion with a B dollars. You say, oh, you're rounding it up to 1.8. Okay. All right, 1.8 billion. So promises kept, and then Keith, let's talk about reparations.
Well, the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution says that no private property shall be taken for public use without just compensation. So in 1862, President Abraham Lincoln signed a bill called the District of Columbia Compensated Emancipation Act, which freed people who were enslaved in this district, in the District of Columbia, during the war, in the Civil War. But at the same time, it offered reparations. It paid reparations to enslavers up to $300 for people who actually enslaved people, but nothing for compensation for the people who were enslaved in this country. So it created a precedent for reparations. This week, as you just acknowledged, our current president created a reparations fund of $1.776 billion, $1776 billion, to be paid to whomever he decides, along with the people on the commission chosen by his attorney, former personal attorney, and people who on the commission can be fired by the current president. He chose to create a reparations fund to pay the people who are his allies, the people who stormed the United States Capitol, the people who tried to overthrow the United States government. And what this says to me, April, is that we haven't learned the lessons of the past. When the Civil War ended, America made the mistake, through the President Johnson, who was a successor to President Lincoln after Lincoln was assassinated, America made the mistake of providing amnesty, forgiveness, and pardons to the people who actually tried to overthrow the United States government, to the Confederates. And we're doing the same damn thing right now. These people tried to take over the United States government on January 6th, and we meaning the current president of the United States, actually gave pardons to these people, forgave these people, and now contemplating the possibility of offering them compensation.
Your tax dollars.
$1.8 billion in compensation. This is a sad state of affairs to me. This says that America is not only not moving forward, we're actually moving backwards. We've erased the Civil Rights Act promises from 1964. We've erased what that was supposed to mean, the idea that the civil rights laws are supposed to be used to actually protect Black people, especially from discrimination. Now they're weaponizing the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department to attack Black people and saying that white men, in particular, straight white men, are the true victims in society. We've removed the promises of the Voting Rights Act. They gutted the Voting Rights Act. They started that in Shelby County versus Holder.
In
Now they've
2013,
continued
yeah.
that in Louisiana versus Callais decision just a couple of weeks ago. We've removed the promises of affirmative action. In 2023, Trump's 3 Supreme Court justices gave the decisive votes to eliminate affirmative action in higher education. We've removed the promise of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we have to say all 3 words because they want to sound it off to DEI, and they don't want you to say diversity, equity, and inclusion because they don't really believe that those 3 things are bad. So they want to hyphenate it DEI, and they can weaponize that to make you fearful of that. We've created a society now where we are losing rights, not to mention the reproductive rights that people are losing right now, the voting rights, the civil rights, the reproductive rights. America today is less free than we were when I was born. And that's a dangerous state of affairs. And we should all be concerned. We should all be up in arms. And yes, as Mary Frances Berry said, somebody needs to go through the fire.
Mm. Wow. And he came in from Houston. On fire.
You know, we all came in from the South today because she came in from New Orleans. She came from New Orleans. I came from Houston, and you were here before, but you came in from Nashville.
Yeah. Well, I came
where
from
all the action
Maryland.
is in the South. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
But all the action is in the South right now. That's where everything's happening.
The oppression.
Same place where it happened before.
The scene of the crime. That's what. Freddie Haynes, congressional campaign. He's running for Congress, Jasmine Crockett's seat, and he's also a pastor. And we were in Alabama over the weekend at Selma, and he said we're back at the scene of the crime, talking about Bloody Sunday. Michael,
when Michael finishes, I want to tell them about John Roberts.
Ooh, you continue. You what? Okay. Pull your mic up. You got your mic?
I don't know.
You don't know how to turn. Here, take mine.
You just have to press the button.
I can't do that. I can't do that. Just you take it. I've been telling my students and telling all of the people in the civil rights community, the lawyers, whose boards I've been on forever. I'm on everybody's boards, I think. Anyway, about John Roberts. And people kept saying to me that John Roberts is really a nice guy. And look at him, he's not like all these other people. That was before when he got, sent up. And so I said, when I wrote the book about the history of the Civil Rights Commission, which is called And Justice for All, I went and read all of John Roberts' memos that he wrote when he was a young lawyer, and he was at the Justice Department for a while, and then he was in the White House. And there were all these memos. And John Roberts has been on a path to gut all of the laws that protect Black people, people of race. He's not so hot on gender either, but race, I started to say, he's got a predilection for wanting to, he hasn't forgotten. And everything that came up when I was on the Civil Rights Commission and the chair, these were issues where he wrote memos in the White House of Justice trying to get the authorities, who we thought were bad enough, to do more. For example, we had recommended that people be permitted to continue to donate money to colleges and universities for scholarships and fellowships for students who were not included, to try to diversify their campuses. And if they wanted to do that out of their own pockets, they could do that. He wrote a memo saying that the president ought to tell the Office for Civil Rights not to let people do that anymore, okay? Because that privileged Black people. All the different things. And if you watch his pattern of the things that he did, people think it's just voting rights. No, school desegregation. When white people out in San Francisco and in Seattle wanted to desegregate their schools and work with Latinos and Black people to do so, that he said, no, the way to get beyond race is to not ever mention it. You can't do that, even if you want to do it voluntarily, because that's discriminatory. Then you come along with the first voting rights decision, Shelby County, in which they got rid of pre-clearance, where after the civil rights movement, if those states that had had nasty negative laws,
Certain
wanted
southern
to
states,
change
racist
them,
laws,
southern
yeah.
states mainly, and make them worse. They had to get everything they did pre-cleared by the Justice Department. They assumed the Justice Department would be honest. Dream on. Anyway, before they could put it in effect, he wanted to get rid of that. And by that time, he was on the court. And he then wrote this opinion in which they did get rid of it on the grounds that it is discriminatory to give this privilege to these people. It's always discriminatory to do something that protects blacks. And then, of course, you got the other cases, the higher education. What happened is his posse finally got together. He finally got all the other justices with him to constitute the majority, so that some things he was trying to do earlier he wasn't able to do because he didn't have the votes. And now he has had the votes for quite a while. So now you've got higher education, you've got everything gutted. So when you think that it's just one thing that he's concerned about, no, he has been on a journey to try to somehow get rid of this. And he probably thinks that it's okay to bring all of those white South Africans over and say they were harmed. You know, I was one of the leaders of the Free South Africa movement, so we worked very hard on that. That was another.
She went to
going through the
jail a
fire,
lot.
all that. Went to South Africa with Mandela. Anyway.
And she taught when she went to jail too. She wanted people to know what it was to fight.
Yes, I walked around in the jails teaching the people, because that's what Martin said you're supposed to do. Teach the people while you're in jail. Don't just sit up there crying. How sad you are. So I was teaching the people. In any case, John Roberts is a wolf in sheep's clothing, for some of you who don't know any better. And they have planned to do this all the time, which is why some people think that, and I think this, that we have to do more than get rid of the cases. We have to do something about the courts, because if the court can strike down not just laws passed by Congress, but also ignore parts of the Constitution and just go on away as if nothing happened, then what else is left? You know, Hamilton, who was one of my favorite people, had a fight with James Madison over the Bill of Rights, and one of the things he thought we didn't need it because we had a separation of powers, and we had 3 branches. And he would say, we don't need to worry, the Congress will keep the president from doing what's wrong, and they will be there too. So why are you so concerned? That's why we made three branches. And Madison said, you know, that thing about if men were angels, you wouldn't need government, but also that you can't count on every president or every Congress doing what they're supposed to do. And so what do we see right before our eyes? So that's John Roberts. He's not one of my favorite people, as you can guess.
Michael, this reparations.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, go ahead. You're rounding it to 1.8 billion. What does this do to this nation if indeed this does happen? I mean, I don't understand how fiscal conservatives are happy with this. That is their raison d'etre. We want to, not pay as much. This man has been spending and spending and spending and trying to get your tax dollars involved in everything.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's a great honor to be here at one of my favorite bookstores in America. I mean, Politics and Prose, Uncle Bobby's, Barbara's Books, and Parnassus. But I done spent a lot of money in this store, and they have rewarded me richly. And to be here with the great April Ryan is a treat. The great Keith Boykin, the Instagram star.
Yes.
And,
yes.
And the great
Mary
Frances
The
Berry.
great, yes.
That's why I will defer my time. Very quick story. The late Reverend Jesse Jackson. I said, Mary Frances Berry. Call her up so I can get a job at University of Pennsylvania. He called her up. She hooked me up, and because of her, I went from DePaul to the University of Pennsylvania. She is the single reason I was able to leverage the authority of the Reverend Jesse Jackson, and she did it, so I owe her so much, and I just show her love. Look, it's not simply how they going to explain? Lucy, you got some splaining to do, all right? These people who are ostensibly committed to social conservatism, to fiscal conservatism, to respecting the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, the Federalist Papers, the E Pluribus Unum, that's all out the door, right? Because we know that this clueless kleptocrat has commandeered the economy of America as his personal ATM until, with the complicity of unconscionable Congress people who stand by and allow this man, this man who is, I don't know, in a toddlerocracy, certainly in a dunceocracy, and certainly this dismal, dim-witted demagogue.
I
and
love
this
how you
foolish
string
fascist.
words together.
It's just, it is unconscionable that we sit here with all of this brilliance and have to really deconstruct what is real plain. And what's real plain is the real religion in America, the real politics in America, the real social construction in America is about whiteness. Stop the lies. The real God of America is whiteness. White evangelical piety subordinates Christianity to this particular president. And not this particular president alone, but the notion and principle that this revanchist, revivalist whiteness, this redemptive whiteness after Reconstruction, the only folk that got compensation were those who engaged in the criminality to begin with. And now you got a slush fund to pay back those January 6th insurrectionists. By the way, when the Declaration of Independence mentions domestic insurrectionists, they talk about black folk. Because the redacted version of the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson had slipped in there a strong criticism of enslavement. They wanted to cut that out because he was talking about the reason these people are, quote, disloyal and going to the British is because they are offering them the possibility of freedom. So what they cut it down to was domestic insurrectionists, talking about us. Ain't that a trip? Who's the domestic insurrectionist now? So for us, I think when we talk about what's going on there, it's not just what the president is doing, it's the complicity of other people who should know better. Yes. The John Roberts, the people who claim to be real smart. But when you, and no disrespect to the school that Keith Boykin went to, I mean, but they did a study and they said most of those Harvard folk got in on legacy. Your mom and daddy gave some money. You were an athlete or they got a building named after you, and they couldn't get in without that assistance. So with the DEI, the diversity, equity, and inclusion, we know the real dumbassery in America. We know the predicate of pomposity without predication. We know this inveterate ninny hammer. And the reason I use these words because I want to call him what he is, a mother father. But I ain't going to do that. Right? So I'm just going to use some other big words to really dismantle this ostensible intelligence. Calling black women stupid and low IQ. You can be
the B word.
Come on, that too. And
he
you
called
can be
Rachel Scott the B word.
Straight up. And you can be you can be a commentator on Fox News one weekend, and the next weekend you are the Secretary of Defense. So what I want to say is the slush fund is nothing more than the empirical verification of the collapse of our democracy. But given what Mary Frances Berry's talked about, what Brother Boykin talked about, Sister April talked about, the tragic thing that many of these white supremacists are going to have to come to grips with is that, and those who claim that this country is collapsing now, is that who was there all along? Who was the canary in the coal mine? Us.
Yes, that's
right. Everything, racism is a dry run for fascism. Everything that fascists complain about, we done been through. Can't vote, can't get your voice out, getting suppressed, a systematic denial of opportunity. We've been there and done that. So as I end, to me, this is why we got to turn to black people now. Before we had a Voting Rights Act, right? Because I'm sure Mary Frances Berry's birth certificate says either colored or Negro. Mine says Negro, right? Born in 1958. I was born 7 years before the end officially of Jim Crow. So what does that mean? What did we do when we didn't have a Voting Rights Act? We built institutions. We had sororities and fraternities and voluntary organizations. We were able to create sustaining networks of affiliation and association among ourselves. Now, I'm not saying that's all we need, but I'm saying I think we are the redemptive characteristic of democracy's salvation in this particular moment. Turn to the people who have already been done in by the vicious point of white supremacy dressed up as democracy and ask them, us, what it is that we did. It wasn't DEI, it was GOD in part that saved us. And people laughed at us. Look at these compensatory believers because they can't beat the white man, so they beat the pews and they engage in frenzied behavior. Well, I tell you what, we didn't have no psychiatry bill, but we had an ability to call on a God to keep us sane in the midst of the chaos. So I would say right now, we have to turn not on each other, but to each other to find out the perspective necessary. What Mary Frances Berry talking about, going through the fire, some through the water, some through the blood, some through the fire, but all through the flood. God gave some sustenance to us. So I think that what we have to do is never give up on the ideal and dream of American democracy. Why? Because we have always been its most virtuous manifestation in the midst of the chaotic denunciation of white supremacy, of the principles they supposedly represent.
Woo. That was a sermon on the pomposity of the presidency. I'm telling you, you're such a wordsmith. But I mean, it's true. And I want people, because we're at the time now, we're going to take your questions. Please come to the mic and ask a question, and we will see who can offer an answer. But as we gather at the mic, don't be shy. Please come to the mic. As we wait for those to come to the mic, we're getting ready to celebrate 250 years. What is that? As they're talking about taking away the 14th Amendment in Alabama. What is that?
Well, you know, the interesting thing about this anniversary, the 250th anniversary of the United States of America, is that this is also the 500th anniversary of enslaved African people in the United States. 1526 in South Carolina, you find black Africans who revolted against their Spanish oppressors. We think of 1619 as the example because that was the English example 400 years ago. But 500 years ago, there were black people in this country who were enslaved. And so there's a legacy that goes far beyond the 250 years. Right. And we need to understand that in context. Donald Trump wants to make it about 1776. It's about 1526 and 1619 and all the years in between.
But July 4th is about the breakaway from England of this country. The freedom away, taking away. I mean, how can we celebrate that when you're trying to take away freedoms from other people? How can we go to China and talk about Taiwan when we're trying to grab Greenland, anything we can grab? We're over in Iran. And I mean, how can we talk about freedoms and survival when you are you're actively oppressing a people in this nation?
Sure, you can talk about it. Listen, there's a duty on the part of people like you and people who read. Well, I remember I got my read your more books shirt on, I forgot. To teach young people, because they're being cut off from learning anything. There's so many that didn't know much before, and now they're being cut off from knowing anything about the history of the country. And there are so many people who, when they try to discuss what's going on now, they don't really have any background or understanding. For example, if you take the whole issue of Iran, I was in the Carter administration, and I used to go in and out of the White House when he was going through with all of the hostage crisis and all the rest of it. And that's when I started doing Nightline, which was a show used to come on ABC at night. I was
Ted Koppel.
all of that, Ted Koppel and all that stuff. But many people don't know anything. They just know what they hear on the TV or whatever it is, and children don't know, and the students who come, they don't know. They don't know that the United States overthrew the duly elected, legally elected president of Iran,
Right.
which made the people really mad. Some of the young people in Iran don't even know it. And that is when the whole thing started and collapsed, because the United States had been able to exploit the country and do all of that. That's just one example, and people didn't want that ever to happen again. So we act like people do things for no reason at all. Why are these crazy people doing whatever they're doing? We have never done anything to anybody. When I hear people say that, I say, you need to go back and read some history. They don't know the history of Ukraine. If they did, they would know that the Ukrainians deposed a duly elected president who was democratically elected as affirmed by all of the human rights organizations, and kicked him out of the country and exiled him because he took the position that they should not try to right away join NATO and join the European Union, because they weren't ready for it yet, and they were ready for it, the people who kicked him out. So they got rid of him. They put him on a plane and sent him out of the country, and he's still out of the country. We have to know things. We have to learn things. And young people, since the schools are not permitted to teach them, somehow we have to make a way that maybe we need to teach them ourselves. I don't know. But you cannot really decide anything or understand it if you don't know the background or the history of anything. There's a Nigerian proverb: if you don't know where you've been, you don't know where you're going.
That's right.
And that's true.
Yes, ma'am.
First, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your wisdom. We always need it, but especially feels like now. My question kind of connects to what we've been talking about, going through the fire. And the first thing that kept coming in my mind was sacrifice. And just thinking how, we've been talking about 500 plus years that we've been here, and all we've done is sacrificed, and how we see like my generation not going out because we're like, we did our work, and we just feel this sense of betrayal.
You mean not going out and protest?
Yes, ma'am. And it's just this feeling of over disillusionment, and it's like the sacrifice is needed, but how do we make sure that we actually gain something lasting? And quite frankly, why should we sacrifice sometimes for others who would never do the same?
I'm going to let the panel, that's a great question. I'm going to let the panel answer, but I want to ask you something, and I'm going to ask all of you. I've always said the greatest pain brings forth the greatest protest. Are you feeling the pain?
I feel like disillusioned. I feel numb. I feel angry. I'm a historian, so I'm lucky enough to know things, which is already kind of a burden. Sometimes it feels like. So I'm not surprised also, which also hurts, but yeah.
I'm going to take an unscientific poll right now. How many of you are feeling the pain, the pinch of everything that's happening right now? All right, all right.
How many of you are nice and not feeling any pinch of anything, and just came out here because
That young man, thank you for your honesty. He said he's not feeling the pinch of anything. I mean, thank you for your honesty. Thank you for your honesty. How many of you have gone out and protested? All right, all right, all right, okay. All right. It's a majority of white people.
Well,
And
you know-
that's what's happening. That's what's happening out in the streets. That's what's happening in these No Kings days and things of that
the
nature.
grannies. The grannies. Do you know about the grannies? Yeah.
Okay.
Last summer in June, when President Trump, I don't even believe I said that. Usually I just say Donald Trump, but for some reason I said president. When Donald Trump sent troops into Los Angeles, I was there on the ground covering the protest of the ICE agents who were there. And there were black people there, but it was mostly Hispanic and mostly white. And I remember being there and being told by people online that this is not our fight. You need to stay out of that. Let them do this. He wants to declare martial law. This is an excuse to get black people out there so that he can do that. And I remember being very frustrated by that. And there were a lot of people who legitimately felt like we did our duty. We showed up at the election in 2024. Some of them were saying they were part of the 92% who voted for Kamala Harris, as did I. But I don't think the democracy ends on election day. You know, Thomas Jefferson, the famous enslaver, said that eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. That means you can't just show up once every 4 years or even every 2 years or whatever. You have to be consistently engaged in the process. And sometimes that means you have to be in the streets. Sometimes it means you have to be knocking on the doors of the members of Congress. Sometimes it means you could be emailing or calling or doing whatever it takes, using your money, your resources, your treasure, your talents to fight for the causes that you believe in. So I just don't like the idea, and I know I get criticized every time I say this, from Black people, by the way. I get criticized for saying it, but I just don't like the idea that we feel like we should sit this out because it's not our battle. Every battle in America is our battle, unfortunately. That doesn't mean we have to bear more of a burden than any other group does, but we are fooling ourselves if we think we're not going to suffer the consequences of it.
So let me say something, Michael, before you say something. I got criticized for going to the White House Correspondents Association dinner. I'm the longest serving Black White House correspondent in the nation's history. I have been on that board and I've advocated for a lot of those people. I went there in protest. And when the shots rang out, y'all might have called it fake or whatever, but I know it was real. And I went under that table and hurt my knee. And it's still hurting to this day. I went there in protest because when nothing else works, when the checks and balances do not work out, the press is supposed to be the last piece for accountability. And I went there in protest. So I couldn't protest because I was going to walk out. But now, you know, we all have to do what we have to do. If the attack on the press, like John McCain said, the late Senator John McCain said, once you start attacking the press, you begin the authoritarianism, you begin the dictatorship. Dictatorship is fascism. Everybody's calling it everything but what it is. Dictatorship. Dictatorship. The pomposity of the presidency. Dictatorship. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
You better preach. Reverend Ryan. Look, I get it. You're tired. You know, I used to work in a factory. It wasn't no summer job. And I'd be on the wheel brake drum because that was my thing. Somebody else on the door. Somebody else on the hood. So you got to stay in your lane and do what you do best. Everybody can't do everything, number one. Number two, we were in shifts. So yeah, if you're working 24 hours, you're going to be tired. But if you put your 8 to 10 hours in, let the next woman or next man come in to relieve you. In the Bible, in the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, Elijah said, it is enough, O Lord, now take away my life. I'm not better than your fathers that had killed all your prophets and killed your altars. Just as my pastor used to say, cancel tomorrow. God says, slow down, Mace, you're killing them. Okay, God didn't say that part. But God said, slow down. Okay, wrong audience. Let me readjust. C-SPAN. Yes. Thou needest to be slower.
Come on, Mike.
Get some rest. Go on, lay down, and get back up. Get some food. Replenish yourself and see that there are 7,000 others who ain't sold out. You are not the only one. And when you think you're the only one, when you feel you're the only one, I tell young people, take what you do with deadly seriousness, but don't take yourself too seriously at all. Because you are not the only cog in the machinery. And as Brother Boykin said, we say we too tired. First of all, we demand white people show up and learn something. And then when we show up to learn, we don't want to teach them. I'm tired. I want to talk to you right now. I get it. Candace Owens going to talk to him. Clarence Thomas going to talk to him. Robert Whoopson, who died today, 89 years old, will speak to them. So the point is, we have to do it in shifts. If you too tired, let Keith Boykin do it. If Keith Boykin's tired, let April Ryan do it, but he ain't never tired. If April Ryan too tired, let Mary Frances Berry do it. But the point is, we must always give account and answer for those who have honest questions about what to do and to seek to inspire. Do you think Martin Luther King, I'm tired of marching for something that should have been mine at birth? That's what he said. I'm tired of marching, but he kept marching. And what we have to do is to call upon those resources. Yes, is it fair? No. Is it necessary? Yes. And perhaps by doing what we do, inspired white brothers and sisters will do what they do. You got a Black Lives Matter march out in Portland. And in areas where they got 4 Negroes, 4 African Americans, 4 black people operating, we need to deputize white people to go into white communities to do what they need to do, and we need to do that inspiration among ourselves. We shouldn't jam each other up for being too tired, for sure, but we got to say, if you're too tired, step aside and let the next person get on board, because the work is too serious, it's too demanding, and we can ill afford to do that. I used to joke, and I would never diss young people talking about self-care, but I imagine if Martin Luther King Jr. said, I was going to march today and give a speech in Washington, but I need a little self-care, so I had to take a spa day, and I'm not mad, I'm not trying to be dismissive, we would have missed one of the greatest moments in history. So let's do self-care, let's do self-love, let's do self-regard, but do it in shifts so that others who are on the front line can continue to represent us and articulate these moments. I'm glad when Keith ain't too tired, because when I look at his Instagram and the stuff he be saying, that gets me riled up. I was like, yep, that knowledge right there, and he's talking real fast, and they cut it and edit in a way that he's just coming like a Drake, boop, 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 boop. That to me is inspiring. Okay, boop, 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 we can cut that out. But it is inspiring to see people do the work that is necessary. All of us got to pitch in.
And I know you're not talking about people talking fast.
I'm celebrating it, bro. I'm celebrating fast talking.
I also believe in doing things, whether they're risky or not. It is the going through the fire thing. I wrote a book called History Teaches Us to Resist. And it has in there the various resistance movements that I was involved in. And I remember sitting on a bench out there in Ann Arbor, and when Martin gave his Riverside speech against the war in Vietnam, I was already involved in the anti-war movement, which was big in Michigan. And I said to my friend Gerald, who was sitting next to me, I need to do more. When he said, you know, like Jeremiah has a chapter in Jeremiah that he said, I know I shouldn't speak out or say anything about this, but it's like fire shut up in my bones. That is Jeremiah. Right?
That is Jeremiah, yes, ma'am.
And I said, I need to do more. So I said, I'm going to Vietnam, and I'm going to be a reporter, and I'm going to report on all this. I wasn't a reporter, but I said, I'm going to be a reporter, and I'm going. I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell anybody, because I knew they'd think I was crazy, because the war was raging. But there were all of these people who had relatives who had been in the war and come back and had PTSD, and their minds were gone, and all kinds of stuff bad stuff was happening to people, poor white people from Tennessee down there where I come from, and other black people that I knew and all of that. And I was just so disgusted by the whole thing. And so I made up a story, and you can read the details of it in the book. We don't have time. But and you don't have to buy it. It's in the library. Oh, I'm sorry. You don't have to buy it. But the thing is that I told them that I wanted to be a reporter at the Pentagon. And how did I get to be there? They said, well, you got to get some subscribers, you know, newspaper people who are gonna, and so that they say they're a correspondent. And I went around and got all these people, including those at the Michigan Daily newspaper. The guy who runs one of the journals now was a student there later, and he read all of my articles that I wrote. But anyway, and they gave me credentials, and I went. I was the only American woman there. There had been one before who was a photographer for Life magazine who got killed. She stepped on a landmine. And so they had somebody following me everywhere I went because they thought I would get killed too, and they didn't want 2 in a row. But it was a terrible experience. It was worth it. I should do it. I did do it. I think I have always, all my life, whenever I think of doing something in the cause of justice, I just get up and do it. And if nobody else wants to do it, that's their problem. And I don't mind the risks, and I don't mind being crazy. But I guess he has a question.
Yes,
right?
yes, and he's been standing so patiently.
Oh.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening to everyone. I'd like to thank April for putting together a great panel.
Thank you.
Great discussion. My question is sort of a follow-on to what the Reverend Doctor was talking about earlier, the Whiteness Project. I see this as an ongoing effort over a number of years, possibly 500 or more years, to create, in at least this hemisphere, a white ethno-state and potentially a white ethno-planet. And I would like to get your opinion on how far you think some of these extremists will go to in order to achieve that. We've seen in this new era of genetic engineering and biotechnology a host of new things that have never been experienced on the planet before, never been seen on the planet before. And I'm wondering whether you think that that's a possibility that we'll have to deal with either already in the past or potentially again in the future.
I'm going to let the panel answer that question, but thank you for that question. I want to say this. Dr. Bernice King, the daughter of the late, great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who would have been 97 years old if he had lived, she said, don't be surprised. She said she doesn't understand why everybody's surprised at things that happen. And I saw her this past weekend in Alabama, and I reminded her, and she said, I still say the same thing. There is no bottom. Do you understand me? There is no bottom. Do not be. Everybody keeps talking about, oh, we're going back to Jim Crow. No. We're going back to roots.
To slavery.
Thank you. We're going back to slavery. That is the plan. Say that, please.
That's the
Say it in
plan.
your microphone.
The plan, when they started the immigration push, and the farmers that I went around and talked to, and the restaurant owners and other people, and they said they didn't have employees because people were scared to come to work, and all the things we know now about what has happened. And I said to a friend of mine, whose name I won't name, a Republican, I said, known a long time, I said, well, who they think going to do all the work? They said, you people. He said, pretty soon, we're firing all these people that Musk fired, Doge, whatever that thing was he did, where many black women, of course, in case you don't know it, got fired. Mostly black women, white women too.
Doge,
if they're not the right kind of white women that they like. So whatever that is. But
the loyalty test was there.
Is that what it is? So he said, y'all, pretty soon, if you can't go to predominantly white school and you don't have the credentials, and you go to HBCU and nobody hire you because they look and see you went to one, so you must be a Negro, then in fact, there's going to have to be a job you're going to have to do. You're going to be out there picking in the fields and doing all these jobs. So the idea is to replace. And he said, don't look at me like I don't know what I'm talking about. It may take a while, but that's what the plan is. And your people don't seem to take it seriously. The people in the legacy organizations, all the people around who care, people who care about these issues, don't take seriously what is happening because they never see the big picture. They see a little bit piece of it here, and that's human. I'm not being critical. So people don't put the pieces together. But he said, you better start thinking about these pieces because if you don't have anything else to do, what else are you going to do? And I said, we're not going back. That's what I told him. I said, I'm not going back. And I don't know anybody in my family is going back. So, good luck with that.
Yeah, well, obviously, the intent of white supremacy or white sovereignty, even more broadly, is to dominate, colonize, subordinate, eventually exterminate anything that is not white. So on the one hand, it sounds like some kind of sci-fi movie where blackness is never envisioned in the future to begin with. So Afrofuturism begins to articulate a notion of blackness projected into the future, predicated upon what's going on in the present and the past. But here's the thing. We're not passive victims to stand by and observe what's going on here. There's the interactive character of human history. And I don't believe that the establishment of, ethno-state to be certain, but an ethno-planet I don't think that's going to happen, just given the demographics of what's going on. They can't colonize the entire world. And although the attempts and efforts have been made and the subordination of one to the other, which is always why I had a problem, I ain't going to get into that, but with Drake and Kendrick Lamar, when Kendrick says, you're not a colleague, you're a colonizer, do you understand what that might mean? The irony is, and I don't mean Kendrick himself individually, but the notion of not like us is one of the greatest white supremacist ethics ever put forth in the history of humankind. The Manichaean distinction between me and you, between ich und du, if you will, between us and them, is itself the manifestation of a white supremacist idea, which is why that song caught on globally in such a powerful way, because it speaks to the zeitgeist, the moment that we're in, where we're trying to make distinctions. 3/5 human, not like us. Slave, not like us. Woman, not like us. Gay and lesbian, not like us. There is a constant preoccupation with that. So I don't think that will occur because of the ability of black people and peoples of color and the sexualized and minoritized populations to stand up and resist the subordination, the fascism, the authoritarianism that's operating within the context of the culture. So as powerful as whiteness is, it can be interrupted, it can be delayed, and ultimately, we hope and pray, it can be destroyed.
Go ahead.
I'm curious because I wasn't planning on getting into this conversation at all, but when you mentioned Drake and Kendrick Lamar, I interpreted "They Not Like Us," even though it was a diss song, a diss track for Kendrick against Drake. I interpreted that to mean that the racists are not like us, not that the people who are like Drake are not like us. I interpreted it to mean that the people who were trying to oppress us are not like us, that they don't have the same sense of values, same sense of let me give you an example. I was having a conversation today. Like I landed at DCA, got off the plane, took a cab to my best friend's house, and the driver was from Sierra Leone. And he told me this whole story about how, which I did not know until today, how black people who fought with the British in the American Revolutionary War. I knew about the ones who went to Liberia, but the black people who fought with the British in the American Revolutionary War went to Nova Scotia after the war, and then to Sierra Leone. I didn't know that they went to Nova Scotia before they went to Sierra Leone.
You
So
should watch some movies.
I never knew about the Nova Scotia thing. Never heard of it till today.
Yeah.
But he was telling me this whole history, and
You're from Nova Scotia.
you're from
right?
Nova Scotia. But it's so interesting because he was telling me this whole history, and it made me realize something that about why I think we are not necessarily the same. When people talk about black nationalism and white nationalism, as I understand it, is about the desire of white people to oppress black people, the desire of white people to be superior to black people in some sort of hierarchical structure. Black nationalism, as articulated, for example, by Malcolm X and others, is about the idea of black people being separate from white racism, but not about oppressing white people or being above white people, but being distinct from white people, acknowledging our differences and finding a way that we can live in a way that we're not terrorized by and traumatized by whiteness.
Well,
I don't know if you.
No, that's interesting because when he says explicitly, no, you're not a colleague, you're a colonizer. See, I think you're giving an incredible perspective, a kind of worldview that makes a distinction between us and the racists who are crypto-fascists who are trying to renounce their commitment to the human race and their common membership is with us. That would be beautiful. I don't think that's what Kendrick. I don't think that's what.
Well, I'm going to
Lamar
say
was saying.
this.
But let me finish this point right quick.
But that
So
was
my
the best
point is-
Super Bowl. That was the best Super Bowl halftime show ever.
I was there. I was
Beyond
there.
Prince, Michael Jackson. I'm like, wait a
But man,
minute.
I was there. But here's my point, though. The notion of not like us is itself, even though it's being articulated by a young black man from Compton, to me is an internalized conception of a distinction between us and them that's driven by a white supremacist ethic that makes the important point that you are not like me. You are not human as I am human. And to call Drake a colonizer, ironically enough, when Kendrick Lamar defended Iggy Azalea from a colonizing country of Australia, saying allow her to stand alone and then and be left alone, while Drake, because he is from Canada, there was a huge kind of, or Nova Scotia and Toronto, think about the blackness where black people escape in order to exist in a powerful way. And I can't tell you how many Nigerians and Caribbeans came to me and say, thank you for at least acknowledging that blackness cannot be reduced to Compton, California. And that's what, to me, what Drake was doing when what Kendrick was doing when he's making an argument against Drake. I didn't see the point you were making. He was making something specific about an internalized conception of blackness that was not legitimate and therefore not authentic and therefore didn't constitute a kind of blackness that was compelling. That's what I heard him say.
I don't want to belabor the point. I'm not disagreeing with your.
We're devolving into rap now.
I don't want to.
I'm trying to save the race. We're not trying to get a discussion about the various rap.
Exactly.
Whatever.
Right. That's what I say. I don't want to.
But wait a minute, guys. Wait a minute. I'm going to say
I
this.
do want to say something else.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I don't want to belabor the point. I think that you make a good point, and I think the larger point though is that there is race is a social construct. The idea that blackness and whiteness and Asian, I guess those distinctions that we created, they were all created by humans within the past 1,000 years. Right. They didn't always exist. They were created to separate us, and that we've bought into them. I think that's part of the argument that you're making as well. That we are all essentially the same. Yes. And so. I don't want to disagree with that part. Right. But what I do want to say is that I think that it's important for us to understand that at this particular moment in time that we have a responsibility, all of us, to be engaged in this conversation.
Absolutely.
Regardless of race or gender, sexual orientation, even whether we're American or not, because this is a global conversation. Absolutely. And what happens in America has an impact on what happens in Europe, in South America, we are part of North America, but has an impact in Africa,
Canada,
and Australia.
South America.
We are part of the Gulf of America, right?
Oh boy!
I just think that the last thing I just want to say about this is that I go back to what Mary Frances Berry was saying about. I can't believe you were actually in Vietnam by yourself. You were in Vietnam by yourself.
She is a bad sister.
That was so inspiring for me to hear that, because there are so many days when I wake up and say to myself, I'm tired of doing this. I don't really know that I have the courage or the patience to continue to do it, or just the energy to continue doing this when I don't necessarily feel like there's a lot of people out there doing it. But when you say you just get up there and you inspire yourself, that regardless of whether anybody else is going to do it, you're going to do it anyway. I think that
we're the ones we've been waiting for.
We are the ones that is the mentality that motivates me. That's what inspires me out of this conversation to keep going, to know that even when you get up some days and you don't feel that you can understand how to get through, when Donald Trump has done something else and Congress refuses to stand up and the Supreme Court refuses to stand up and no one will stand up and do something, that we still have to fight.
But I know we're out of time, but I have to take this. Randall Robinson. I have to tell you this. I know we're out of time, but Randall Robinson, my dear friend and comfort in the Free South Africa movement, and all the men who were in the leadership group with us have died, and all the women are still here. Isn't that interesting? In any case, Randall, when he first came to me and asked me if I would help him start the Free South Africa movement, he said, I know you'll be afraid, because, we might get arrested, things might happen to us and so on, but it's a worthy cause. And he was, trying to explain to me and urge me. And when he finished, I said, Randall, you don't know that I was a war correspondent and that I saw so many people get killed and maimed and old people and children running and people bleeding and dying, and our young people who didn't know what they were. I lived through that. I said, you don't have to worry about me being scared. I will go do what I have to do. And so we should all just get up and do what needs to be done and not think about how fearful we might be or scared even of Trump. Just do what needs to be done.
Let me tell you something. You said you're not scared of him? All right, come with me to the White House. There's a whole, you can say it from here, but when you have to face that, and when you have his minions come find you, and you have a Caesar Sayoc bomb come to your home, you have the FBI come to your home, the bomb squad, you have to move your home. it's a whole different thing. But still, we all stand today. And that, what you say, I'm glad you and I have had conversations and I've encouraged you, because what you're doing is a mission from God. You are helping people understand in layman's terms what's going on. Like Michael said, I want you to keep going. I'm tired too. Donald Trump has made me into independent media, but thanks to my husband, I keep going. I'm going to keep going. And thank you, Lissa and Brad, because it takes a community. We all do what we can. And I remember hearing stories from the late Congressman John R. Lewis. He was talking about how some of the women didn't go out and march, but what they did is went in their yard and got the maters and the taters and maters and made food and put the pallets in the house for Harry Belafonte, John Lewis, and all the lieutenants so they could be fortified to go out there and march. We have to find some way to do what we can to make a difference, because I am my brother's keeper. No, I am my brother. I am my sister's keeper. No, I am my sister. And with that said, I thank you all. Brad and Lissa, thank you so much for this 11th in the series of the Black Authors Panel for Race in America. Michael, Keith, and the great Mary Frances Berry, all of them traveled in to tell you something tonight. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for your courage. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you all.